Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My 38 male and my wife 38 female have been married for 10 years. We've raised two wonderful children together, and we had a happy life up until she threw it all away. We met in our late 20s through a mutual friend who thought we would hit it off. He set us up on a blind date, and we instantly connected. I took her back to my apartment that night, and she never left. We were both young professionals focused on our careers and making names for ourselves. I admired her tenacity and ambition, and I knew early on that I wanted to be with her forever. Fast forward 10 years, my wife had been anticipating a huge promotion at work, so she was constantly at the office trying to put in the extra effort for it. The promotion would come with a large bonus that we planned on using to remodel our house and add a room for her mom to come live with us. I didn't think anything of her staying at the office later than normal. In hindsight, I can only wonder what happened all those nights that she didn't leave until 8 p.m. One night, she came home and told me about a conference that she was asked to attend in Baltimore. It wasn't an unusual occurrence for her to have to travel for work, so we made the proper arrangements for me to watch over the kids by myself while she was out of town. I kissed her goodbye and told her that I would miss her when she left, and she said the same thing. The first night that she was gone, she called me over FaceTime from her hotel room. She told me about how exhausted she was and gave me some details about the conference. She looked really stressed out, which I just assumed was because it was so last minute and she might have been unprepared. Looking back, I'm pretty sure it was because she did something with her boss that first night and felt guilty. The next day, she texted me in the morning telling me she would be busy all day and wouldn't have time to check in, but she wanted me to tell the kids that she said good morning and that she loved them. I hadn't heard from her all day, but around 10 p.m. in the evening, I got a text message from a mutual friend. This mutual friend was the one who actually set us up 10 years ago. He was a close friend of mine from college, and he worked with my wife and knew her fairly well as an acquaintance. It had been a few weeks since we last talked, so I picked up my phone to see what was new with him. As soon as I opened our conversation, I felt my heart sink to my stomach. He attached an image of my wife sitting at a bar very close to her boss with her hands on his chest and looking up at him with a smile. The message just said, "I'm not sure what's going on, but I thought you should see this." I didn't know how to respond, so I didn't. I tried to rationalize why she would be in such an intimate position with him, but I couldn't think of any good reasons. I didn't want to jump to conclusions. I needed more information. Right away, I found her laptop and logged in. Her emails were relatively clean. I didn't see any signs of infidelity within them, but they were mostly work-related. I closed her laptop and resolved not to worry about it until I could talk to her. I really didn't want to cause some huge blow-on argument by accusing her of something she didn't do, and I trusted her enough to come clean if she did do anything. She got home Sunday night exhausted and complaining about having a horrible headache from the busy, loud crowd at the conference. I climbed into bed to go to sleep shortly after she arrived. She left to take a quick shower, leaving her phone behind. I definitely tried to ignore my curiosity, but I couldn't. I quickly scanned through her phone and looked for any signs of her cheating. Specifically, I searched through her messages with her boss. I didn't see anything right away, and I felt relieved. However, before I could put the phone down, I got a push notification from a fantasy football app. For reference, my wife does not care about sports. Her having a fantasy football app was pretty strange, so I had to click on the notification. As it turned out, the app was not about fantasy football. Instead, it was a discreet messaging app with a false notification system. I found all the evidence I was looking for in that app. Her boss had texted her and told her that he enjoyed the time they spent together and couldn't wait to see her again on Tuesday. I quickly searched their other messages and figured out that the conference was the first time they slept together. Apparently, they had been talking and exchanging pictures long before then. I quickly screenshotted some of the pictures they'd exchanged and sent them to myself, deleting them from her phone so she didn't even know they were sent. She got out of the shower and I rolled right over and pretended to fall asleep. I didn't want to talk to her about what I saw. In fact, I wanted to be as far away from her as possible. There was no chance I wanted to be with her again after finding that out. I loved her, but she completely shattered my trust in her. Divorce was the only option for me. I also knew that I wanted to get my revenge on her. Historically, I've been terrible at giving gifts for Valentine's Day and our anniversary. Things like that. My wife would always tell me that I could do more to show how much I cared about her. Well, I figured I might as well take her advice. Valentine's Day was right around the corner, so I planned to humiliate her in front of her coworkers and expose her boss for what he did. I explained the situation to the company and they helped me figure out some details. I then sent the evidence of what the boss did to HR and he instantly got fired. Later on, I showed up to her work carrying a bouquet of yellow roses, which apparently signifies betrayal. Several of my wife's coworkers gathered around while I read the message, assuming it was a declaration of my love. Instead, I served her with divorce papers and read a message telling her I knew about the affair with her boss and that it was over. The look on her face as the envelope was handed to her was priceless. We ended up filing for divorce. I kept the house and she moved in with her mother. Now we have joint custody of our children. Oh, B, I'm so sorry that you had to go through that. It sounds like you had a picture-perfect life before she betrayed you and threw it all away. Considering she thought ahead to use a discreet messaging app, one wonder if you would have ever found out if it hadn't been for your friend cluing you in. It does seem like she might have felt guilty at first, but even after she returned from the trip, she still didn't say anything. She was likely going to continue her affair for as long as she could. I'm glad you were able to divorce her and move on with your life. I hope you recover from the breach of trust and are able to move on. Now, let's move on to our next story. A little backstory. My wife, 27 female, and I have been married for 5 years and things had been going well. We had some issues at the beginning of the pandemic due to the forced proximity, but we worked through them and came out stronger on the other side. My wife's biological father died when we were on our honeymoon. We ended up having to leave early and come back to the States to help plan for the funeral and comfort her mother. After a few years, her mom decided to start dating again, and that's when she met her new husband. It took a bit of adjusting for my wife because she felt somewhat betrayed that her mother had moved on. I helped her see that her mother was still young and she couldn't go through the rest of her life alone. At first, she didn't even care to get to know the man. He was a few years younger than her mother, but not so much as to cause concern. I guess in my wife's head, she automatically assumed the worst and thought he was with her mom for her money. I was close with her mom as well, so I took it upon myself to try and unite the family and convince my wife to give her new stepdad a proper chance. After about a year, it seemed like she was really warming up to him. As it turned out, they had a lot in common, and they were able to find some common ground to bond over. Last summer, we invited a bunch of relatives to stay at our house for the weekend. We had just installed an in-ground pool and hot tub, so we threw a huge barbecue to put them to good use. I noticed about halfway through the evening that my wife was MIA. She was supposed to be helping me with a lot of the cooking and hosting the party. I looked everywhere for her, but I couldn't find her. About an hour after I realized she was missing, I saw her walking up to the pool with her stepfather close behind. I walked up to them and asked where they were. They both just shrugged their shoulders, and my wife said they had gone to the small pond behind the house to see if there were any fish. I didn't think anything of it then, but now I know that is where this all started. Weeks and months passed, and my wife had been growing distant. I knew things were stressful for her at work, so part of me thought that was where it stemmed from. She was also spending more time with her stepfather, which I never thought was anything to be concerned about. He had a boat that he would take her fishing on, since that was something she used to do with her dad. The more I think about this story, the more I know Freud is rolling around in his grave screaming that he was right. Anyway, I pulled my wife aside one weekend when she had planned on fishing with him and told her that I felt like she was pulling away from me. I suggested we go out, just the two of us, and spend the weekend somewhere nice. She seemed reluctant to agree, but in the end she called her stepfather and canceled. I booked us an errand at this cozy mountain lodge so we could spend some quality time along sightseeing. When I say she was glued to her phone the entire trip, believe me, she hardly took her eyes off of it. I didn't want to say anything about it because I could sense that we would just argue about it if I did, so I kept my mouth shut. However, I was curious about what was so important. Later that afternoon, she decided to take a nap in front of the fireplace. I took the opportunity to peek at what she was up to. Right away, I was shocked by what I found. The text message exchanges between her and her stepfather were filthy. They had been sending each other pictures and scheduling dates to go out. They had been referencing things they had done on the occasions they'd been together. I realized that all of the boat trips were just an excuse for them to sleep together. Not only was I furious about what she had done to me to throw away our marriage, but I was also angry about what she had done to her mother. Her actions were completely unforgivable, and I could see no way of moving forward with her. I didn't have time to send myself any screenshots or record any of the evidence. She was a light sleeper, and I didn't want her to wake up and see me snooping at her phone. I needed to catch them in the act. That would be the only way I could divorce her and retain my assets. She woke up shortly after and immediately looked through her phone, no doubt texting her stepfather discussing things. I faked a stomach bug so we could go back to the house and I could distance myself from her. Because we cut the trip short, she used that as an excuse to meet up with her stepfather to go fishing. I just nodded my head and told her to go for it because I didn't want to look at her. I didn't realize what opportunity was in front of me when she left, but shortly after I realized it was the perfect time to catch her. I debated involving her mother-in-law in all of it, but in the end I figured that she needed to know. I called her up to see what she was doing, and when I told her I wanted to grab lunch, she was more than happy. On the way there, I told her I had to drop something off for my wife at the boat. We both walked down the docks to where the boat was and boarded it. It was still at the marina, so I worried that maybe they weren't actually on the boat together. When we walked to the cabin below, we found them. We caught them in the middle of the act together. I pretended to be shocked and comforted my mother-in-law while she digested what was happening. My wife tried to justify it by saying she was in love with him unlike she had ever been with anyone else, but it only made things worse. I drove my mother-in-law home, leaving them both behind on the boat. I comforted her and ensured she was okay before I made any attempts to figure out what I planned to do. Eventually, she calmed down enough to call my wife and confront her. She told her over the phone that she never wanted to see her again and couldn't forgive her for what she'd done. I stayed with my mother-in-law for a couple of days, so she wouldn't feel so alone. After we took all of her future ex-husband's things out of the house and changed the locks, I went home to find that my wife had left. I emailed her telling her I was filing for divorce, but she never replied. I still have no clue where she or her stepfather are, but I'm filing for a default divorce. Opa. I can't believe you had to go through something like this, and I am truly sorry for you and your mother-in-law. First of all, good on you for standing by her when she was going through something so difficult. It's unbelievable that her own daughter would stoop so low. It's clear that your soon-to-be ex-wife was immature and selfish. Not only did she throw away your marriage, but she also ruined her own mother's. Running away and avoiding the consequences of her actions is an immature move that is only drawing out the pain for you while you wait for the divorce. My wife and I were married for 10 years. Our anniversary party was coming up, and I couldn't believe I was lucky enough to find someone to be with for so long. We knew everything about each other and were best friends. Our zodiac signs were soulmates, so maybe that explains it. I did see that her sign can be known for cheating, but I ignored that, and for 10 years it was fine. We had a daughter 3 years into our marriage. My wife worked the same career all those years, and she was about to receive her biggest raise yet, just before our planned summer family vacation. It really seemed like I found true love and would always have her. The night she got home from getting her raise, she was flustered and blown away at the good news. She acted like it hadn't sunk in yet. I thought I saw an expression on her face that looked blown away and worried about something. I asked if she was having trouble believing her own success, and she forced a laugh and said yeah. She wasn't convincing me. I knew something else was going on, but when I tried asking, she said she was fine and only pleasantly surprised. I didn't know what else to say, but her cheating on me did not cross my mind. Then she said something weird. Before she went into our bedroom, she said her boss is incredible and she was lucky he likes her so much. This made me do a double take. It sounded weird, and I think she realized she slipped by saying it that way. The next day was the same day as our anniversary party. As we got ready, she got a phone call, and it was her boss. She dismissed herself to talk in the office, which she normally did, so she could write stuff down for later. Unbeknownst to my wife, I snuck right up against the door to listen to their conversation. At first, She just thanked him again for the raise, and then she got really quiet. She whispered that she was glad she could thank him properly, that he was really amazing, and that she wanted to feel him again. Then she asked him if there were any security cameras that could see into his office. She was quiet for a beat, then said that was good, because no one could find out what they were doing, or they'd be fired. I was putting together a pretty clear picture in my head. I wanted to barge into the room and tell her I heard everything, but I decided to make an announcement at our anniversary party. I had to do something that would force me to follow through with confronting her and divorcing her. I was sure she just confirmed out loud that she slept with her boss in his office. I stood paralyzed outside the door until she came out. She was really worried I was standing so close. She was trying to figure out if I was okay, but I just plastered on this fake smile. She asked if I was ready, and we left. I was like a zombie, and she was antsy. She only smokes cigarettes when she's really stressed out, and on the way there she lit one. She tried asking me again if I was okay, and I know she really wanted to ask if I heard her conversation. We arrived at the venue, and I turned to her to say, "Let's go celebrate our 10-year marriage, wife." I sounded like a robot in the absence of anger, and she knew I heard them, but she couldn't bring herself to talk to me about it. We went inside, and she sat there sweating until I got up to give a speech. I let her sit there for a while, taking my time to calmly greet our friends and family and pretend everything was fine. Our 7-year-old was there too. She was at my parents' for the week to give my wife and I time to ourselves as an anniversary present. Seeing all of our loved ones and daughter made my wife start itching herself a lot. She looked like she was going through withdrawals. Her face was red, and people actually started circling her, saying she didn't look good. She swore she was fine, but people could see her skin was slick with sweat. I took this as an opportunity. I told everyone in a loud and clear voice that my wife was having an affair with her boss. Everyone gasped, and my wife fainted. Since our family and friends aren't heartless, they started fanning her and got a cold cloth for her forehead. The old-fashioned thing to do, I guess. When she came to, she was so ashamed she couldn't speak. She finally said she wanted to go home, and I asked her what home. She started bawling and ran to the bathroom. I thanked everyone for coming and picked up my daughter and took her home. We were in bed while my wife called a few times. 2 other people called, but I didn't hear any of it because I was asleep. I think I felt so content that I found out the truth before long and followed through with kicking her out. I found out later that one of my wife's cousins let her stay at her house. That wasn't all that was going to change, though. I emailed their company's HR about what happened. They got back to me a week later, thanking me for the information and informing me proper action was taken. My wife called me first. She said I was a low slime bag for ruining her and her boss's careers that they worked towards their whole life. I told her she was a low slime bag for ruining our marriage after I worked hard for her and our daughter for 10 years of my life. How could she ever look up to her mother again? I didn't hear from her until visitation with our daughter started after our divorce. I've already found a woman with a daughter of her own that's done things for me my ex never would have considered, but it's bittersweet because I realized I wasted a lot of time trusting her. Opie, I am sorry your wife made the dishonorable decision to sleep with her boss as a thank you for a raise and that she had the nerve to talk to him on the phone about it behind your back. She obviously didn't realize the magnitude of her mistake and that they wouldn't get away with this consequence-free. I am glad to hear what steps you took to get her out of your life and own up to her mistake. She deserved every minute she felt uncomfortable or sick because of her actions. She didn't consider you were her daughter, who looked to her for an example of how a woman and wife behaves. It's a shame, and I am glad you have a second chance at living life with a better, more trustworthy woman. I wish you all the best with your situation. Now, let's get into our second story for today. My wife, 35, of 2 years, had been working as a college professor for a few years when this story took place. She had worked hard for several years to get this job, and she had every right to be proud of herself. Her parents certainly were. She had a huge graduation and new job party with the whole family in town. We even waited to get married per her request so that she could ensure her dream job. This was what she was all about, and I couldn't imagine her doing anything that would jeopardize her job or our future together. But I wouldn't be here today if she didn't. She became good friends with some of her students. They were in their late 20s, so they were similar enough in age, but I did think it was a little weird that she was friends with them while also being their professor. It didn't seem like a very professional choice, but I hesitated to tell her my opinion. She actually went to some of the parties they had. As far as what she told me, it was more like a group get-together, much more chill than a party. She said they even discussed some of the lesson topics with her because that's just how passionate and focused her students were. I just let it keep happening. I really wish I would try to convince her to stop mixing her dream job with pleasure, but she was so happy. She really was on top of the world and felt like she was making a difference in their lives. She always came home at a reasonable time because she didn't want to leave me alone all night, and she never went out more than 2 times a month. I knew something was wrong when she stayed out until 2 a.m. I was awake and waiting for her, and we had a fight. She said she was just helping her students, but this was unacceptable to me. I demanded to know what was really going on, but she wouldn't say anything different. I asked her not to socialize with students for a while, and she freaked out. She called me controlling and started crying. She claimed to be a responsible woman that deserved to live her life freely, especially when she found someone that made her so happy. My eyes went wide. She quickly corrected herself to say something and said she was mixing up words because I was confronting her and she was tired. I was so concerned by her mistaken wording, but I didn't have it in me to argue any more that night. I couldn't ask her to take off work either. I wasn't sure how or when I was going to bring this up again. I knew I should, but I thought I'd just wait to see what else she was going to do. For a while, everything calmed down. She didn't stay out and only went to work and came home. It was great, but she still had to grade papers at home, and for that I left her alone to study. I then walked in on her texting someone, and it made her jump out of her skin. That was weird, but I didn't draw attention to it. I thought about checking her phone later, but she had a code on it. I decided I was going to set up an opportunity for her to bring students to the house, but I'd secretly be hiding nearby. I needed to know who these people were and if something else was going on. She fell for it super quickly. As soon as I said I was going to spend an evening with my mom in the nursing home, she was thrilled. She said I was so sweet for going and offered to give me a ride and then pick me up later. To throw her off, I agreed and walked back to the house. It took 20 minutes. I wasn't sure what I was going to find, but I still had trouble picturing my wife doing anything less than honorable. A few times I told myself I was crazy and started walking back to my mom, but then I turned back around again. When I got there, I could see a different car outside her house. She expected to have all the time she needed to do whatever she wanted and then come pick me up. Seeing the mystery car fueled me, and I ran to the front door. I unlocked it with shaking hands and saw the most disturbing thing I'd ever seen. My wife was having sex with her student. Before either of them put their pants on, I took a picture. It's a high-tech world now. I took my phone out when I saw the mystery car so I'd be prepared to take a picture of whatever my wife was up to. If it was all good, I would have been the crazy one, but now she was. It all started to hit me after she got her pants on and her student ran outside. She started yelling God knows what while my head started pounding. I could only hear my heartbeat as I thought about how our marriage was over and the future I expected to have with her was a false hope. Her career was over. She'd never be allowed to teach at this school again. The next school would want to know why she was fired from this school. I snapped out of it and demanded to know why she risked everything she worked so hard to build for one of the first students she ever had. She stared at me blankly and then said he asked her to hang out with him and she didn't expect anything bad to happen. I started yelling when I said something bad has definitely happened. She brought him to our house and opened her legs. She started flipping me off and screaming at me, saying it wasn't her fault, and I stopped them from finishing, so it shouldn't even count. My jaw dropped. I told her she was so shockingly wrong in her logic that I couldn't even argue with her. I packed my bags and got hotel room. I didn't feel like arguing with her anymore that night about who was going to be the one to leave. It felt like I was talking to a spoiled brat that expected to get away with this because of everything she accomplished prior to it. I was not going to stick around, and I wasn't going to let her keep her job either. I filed for divorce and sent the picture to the president of the college just as I suspected she was fired. She hated me and could not look me in the eye at any of our future interactions. I never saw her eyes again. She went from a confident, flawless, overachieving woman to one of shame and disgrace. Her parents couldn't even believe it and actually asked me to send them the picture. I did reluctantly. They apologized to me. My wife didn't work for any colleges in the state. After waiting a few years, she moved out of state probably because she couldn't get a job no matter where she applied. I have started dating again, but I will not be quick to believe I know someone's personality or that they'll remain trustworthy at all times. Opa. I am so sorry your wife betrayed you by bringing one of her students into your house and sleeping with him. It's despicable, and I can only imagine how surprised you were. Given how hard she had to work to get this job and how happy she was, you would have thought she'd be able to make the honorable choice not to risk her marriage or job. I congratulate you for taking the steps you needed to, knowing when you had to leave, filing for divorce, and showing the college president evidence of what she'd done. She had so much support and a great future ahead of her, and she flushed it down the toilet because she couldn't resist one of the first men she encountered as a professor. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. You won't believe what happened to me recently. 23 male, just leased my first apartment with my girlfriend, 22 female, of 2 years. We were only living there for a month before I found evidence of her affair. She let me know while we were dating that she was pretty sure she was bi. I shrugged it off. That was fine, right? As long as she knew what it meant to be in a committed and loyal one-on-one relationship. I asked to make sure she was only exclusively seeing me after 4 months into our relationship, and she said yes. She would message her friends all the time but promised me she took our relationship seriously. Fast forward a year and a half, and we're very much in love and getting our first apartment together. A signed lease with each other. I was a little nervous, but I thought that was normal. We were together so often and we'd be living together. There's no way she could have something going on behind my back. I was kinda wrong because she got away with something for a month. One morning, as I got ready for work, I found long blonde hair in our bed. Since I had short black hair and she had curly brown hair, I was pretty certain qualified as evidence of an affair. I showed it to her and asked if she had someone else in our bed. She shrugged and asked what I'd do about it if she did. I was speechless, and she added that if I was cool about it, maybe I could join them. I said I would end the relationship immediately because I wouldn't stand for being cheated on. She said we'd just signed the lease together, so I have to suck it up and appreciate what I had. I told her she was a psycho for thinking I was okay with this, and I paid a visit to the leasing office. The landlord was very empathetic and outraged at my story. She wrote me a letter that rescinded the lease. My ex was furious and started screaming and throwing stuff around. She wouldn't be able to lease the apartment without me because she still didn't have a job. I asked her why she couldn't just move in with AP, and she said it was none of my business. I didn't care. At least I knew she couldn't have a place to bring her back to. The landlord had another rental available, and she let me rent for cheap to help me cope with an unexpected life change. So my ex tried reaching me for a month until she finally gave up. I know she hates me even though she's a heartless cheater. She didn't have the maturity to rent a home with someone, and I wish I would have been able to tell her that. Living with someone requires selflessness, understanding, and responsibility. She acted like living with someone only meant they had to help her pay the bills, no matter how badly she treated them. That's selfish and controlling behavior if I ever saw it. I became a house party host, which is something I never would have thought to do before, in fear of my fiancé going out of her way to flirt with other people. I'm enjoying my freedom and certainly hope others don't fall for someone as disrespectful as this girl. Opie, I am so glad you were able to get the lease rescinded on the grounds of her infidelity. I can't believe she had the nerve to act like what she did wasn't despicable. Any woman out there listening, I hope you never behave like this woman. She thought the world and her fiancé owed her something when she was only proving what a terrible spouse she was. She was far from the selfless, respectable, and supportive woman that men need as their wives. I think if she would have spent more time getting to know herself before dating or committing herself to a serious relationship, she could have figured out more for certain who she would want to be with for the long haul. Or even if being in a long-term committed relationship was for her. If it wasn't, of course, she would need to find an honest way to provide for herself and maintain her independence instead of roping in someone to help her pay the bills. Thank you for sharing this story. I have faith you're going to be okay, because you knew you had to dump her and got away from her quickly. Anyways, let's now get into today's second story. My wife, 38, and I, 40, celebrated our 8-year wedding anniversary. That was the last fond memory I have of us, because after that I became aware of her secret relationship. I wasn't very fond of social media or people, so I didn't have any accounts like that. I know it might be hard to believe. If it makes you feel better, I made one for the purpose of investigating my wife's activities. I got an email the week after our 8-year wedding anniversary that confirmed my wife's decision to move her phone number from our phone plan to AP's. It named the account her line was added to, which included AP's name. My vision started spinning. I joined Facebook and looked up his profile. It turned out he just celebrated a 2-year dating anniversary with my wife. I could not believe what I was looking at. It was like an alternate reality, where my wife never met me. She had all this time and trust, without me watching her, to leave our home and live a second life with this guy. I felt betrayed and worthless. I took screenshots of the profile and the confirmation email. I presented these to my wife when she arrived home from her sister's, so she said. It was hard for her to speak because the proof was right in front of her. She was dating another man for 2 years, bragging about it on Facebook and convincing her family that he was the same man she told them she married. We just had an on-again, off-again relationship. It made no sense. She started sobbing and told me she seriously regretted it, but he was helping her pay back student loans and improve her credit, which would ultimately help us. I told her that didn't make up for her sleeping with him. I was screaming at this point. Almost 10 years of my life was wasted on her. She told me it was purely a business scheme to her, and she only considered him a friend. She said it wasn't her fault he took her so seriously and pronounced their love on Facebook. I told her she was blind and stupid if she couldn't admit she was taking advantage of this man and me. She was only looking out for herself and didn't care how either of us would feel if we knew the other existed. She looked ashamed, but she just asked me if this meant she had to leave. I told her to get out and called her a cheating pile of dirt. So she left, but she only walked the 20-minute walk to her dad's house. She didn't take her car, which sat in the driveway parked behind my car in the garage. She took her car keys and 2 bags of belongings with her. I tried calling her the next day when I realized she didn't drive, but had her keys, and she didn't answer. I tried over and over, but she only texted with, "You couldn't forgive me, so now you have to live without me, no matter how hard it is." I only replied by asking why she left her car in my driveway. This is when it dawned on me that I hadn't contacted AP, even though I most definitely could. My wife was probably getting rides around town from him, and she just wanted me to be inconvenienced and slower to leave her because I couldn't drive anywhere. Well, I fixed that really quickly. I sent him proof of our marriage, anniversary date, and everything, and waited for things to happen. He freaked out and asked me if he could come to talk to me. I agreed. He came to my house, and we spoke in the front yard. He said he was supposed to go get her from her dad's that very night, but he had no idea she was married. I told him he could have her if he wanted, but yes, she was a cheater, and she would probably cheat on him too, as soon as she got bored or felt like getting new attention. I pointed out her car parked behind mine, and he freaked out again. She was caught in another lie. He said she told him her car was being fixed, and she needed $1,000 for him for repairs. My jaw dropped. She was lying to him for money. I don't know why I was as surprised as I was. So, AP helped me jack up her car and move it to a no parking zone. Then we coasted her. She was stuck at her dad's house with no response from either of us. She finally walked to my house to find that her car was missing, and she couldn't get inside because I took back her key. She banged on the door and cried. She yelled out questions like why wouldn't I answer her? Where was her car? Why was this happening? And other things. I thought about calling the police, but her dad came by and told her to get in his car. She did, reluctantly. She eventually found her car in the possession of a towing company. She had to pay a ton of money to get it back, and her dad made her get a job at McDonald's to learn something about privilege and respect. She isn't happy, but I am relieved. The divorce was easy, which was great because I was already going through enough emotionally. I know she has no dating life with her dad hovering over her and on a part-time McDonald's income at 38 years old. I'm hoping men are spared the fate of courting her. Wow, up. You had to go through a spouse's worst nightmare. Discovering out of the blue after an anniversary that your spouse has been seeing someone else for the past 2 years is terrifying. I wish I could have spared you this reality, but thank you for sharing what happened, in hopes that it could spare someone else heartbreak. Let this be a lesson to everyone not to start a side relationship under the assumption that you won't be caught, or deserve help paying debt, or deserve more attention, or whatever other unfair reason an immature person would give for cheating. The truth always comes out, and chances are, if you're the one cheating, there will be hard consequences to face. When your world crumbles apart the moment your affair is exposed, you'll wish you could take it back or have a second chance. If your spouse is smart, they won't give you a second chance at keeping them. If the relationship is bad, of course, there's therapy and communication as a remedy. If all else fails, end the relationship before starting a new one. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. Hey, everyone! Welcome back to my channel. I should have known that suggesting a threesome over dinner would lead to more than just an interesting conversation. It all started when I casually mentioned an article one read about couples spicing up their sex life with a third person. Tom's eyes lit up like a kid who just found out Christmas came twice a year. We joked about it, laughed it off, and then, of course, the jokes turned into actual research. For the next few days, Tom and I were glued to our laptops, diving deep into the world of threesomes. Forums, articles, you name it, we read it. It was like prepping for an exam, except the subject was sex, and the stakes were our marriage. We had long discussions about boundaries, what we'd be comfortable with, and where the hard lines were. It felt oddly clinical, but necessary. If we were going to do this, we needed rules. The next step was finding someone who'd be interested in joining us. This part was surprisingly tricky. We created a profile on a dating app specifically for threesomes, trying to find the right balance between discreet and intriguing. Our bio was a masterpiece of subtlety, and we even had a couple of tasteful photos that suggested fun couple without screaming, desperate for a third. Then came the messages. Most were a hard pass, creepy, weird, or just plain no. But then there was Emma. Her message stood out. Articulate, funny, and genuinely interested. She seemed perfect, and both Tom and I felt a mix of excitement and nerves. It was like waiting for a date, but with an extra layer of, what the hell are we doing? Meeting Emma was like stepping into a scene from a rom-com. We chose a cozy, dimly lit cafe, the kind where every corner had a candle and whispered conversations filled the air. Emma was even more charming in person, confident, witty, and completely at ease. It was almost too good to be true. The conversation flowed naturally, and by the end of the night, it felt like we had known her for years. We set a date for the encounter, choosing a weekend when we were both free. The anticipation over the next few days was a roller coaster of excitement and sheer panic. We prepped the house like we were hosting a royal visit, candles, fresh sheets, and a guest room that looked like something out of a romantic getaway ad. It was all very Pinterest perfect, masking the chaos in my head. The day finally arrived. Tom and I double-checked everything, from the wine to the lighting. We had another talk about our nerves, reassuring each other that this was something we both wanted. Or at least, that's what we kept telling ourselves. The butterflies in my stomach felt more like a flock of birds trying to escape. As the clock ticked closer to the time Emma was supposed to arrive, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were standing on the edge of something huge, something that could either be the most exhilarating experience of our lives or a complete disaster. But there was no turning back now. Emma was on her way, and our carefully constructed plan was about to be set in motion. I never thought I'd be standing in my living room, heart pounding, waiting for another woman to join me and my husband for what could either be the best decision or the dumbest move of our lives. But here we were, the night of the big adventure. Emma arrived, looking like a vision. Stunning was an understatement. She had this effortless elegance that made me wonder if I should have dressed up more. Too late now. We shared a few drinks to ease the tension. Emma was charming, just as she had been in the cafe, but the air was thick with anticipation. I tried to keep the conversation light, but every now and then, my mind would wander to what was about to happen. The clinking of glasses and nervous laughter filled the room as we tried to relax. Tom was doing his best to stay cool, but I could see the slight tremble in his hands as he poured another round. Emma, sensing our collective jitters, suggested a game of truth or dare. Classic move, I thought, rolling my eyes internally, but it was just what we needed to break the ice. The dares started tame, like swapping shirts or sharing embarrassing stories, but quickly escalated to more intimate challenges. The tension shifted from nervous to electric. The first real touch was like a jolt. Emma gently caressed Tom's arm, and I watched, heart racing. They kissed, and for a moment, I was a spectator in my own life, feeling a bizarre mix of excitement and dread. When Emma turned to me and we kissed, it was a strange but oddly uniting moment. There it was. The start of the threesome, no turning back now. We moved to the bedroom, where things got intense. Boundaries we'd said were tested and redefined in the heat of the moment. It was a whirlwind of sensations and emotions. Exhilarating, liberating, terrifying. I kept thinking, is this really happening? But it was, and there was no denying the thrill of it all. Afterwards, we lay in bed, spent and tangled. Emma thanked us with a smile that seemed to say 1,000 things at once, and then she was gone. Tom and I were left in the silence of our room, processing the night. It felt surreal, like a dream you're not sure you want to wake up from. For a moment, I felt closer to Tom than ever before. We just shared something incredibly intimate and raw. The next morning, we had the post-encounter talk. Sitting in the kitchen, sipping coffee, we dissected every moment. Tom agreed it was exciting and fun, but there was edge to his voice, a hint of uncertainty that he tried to mask. I chose to ignore it, not wanting to tarnish the fresh memory with doubt. The following days were a mix of heightened intimacy and strange new dynamics. We couldn't stop talking about the experience, reliving moments, and laughing at the awkward bits. It felt like we had unlocked a new level in our relationship. But every now and then, I'd catch Tom with that faraway look, and a tiny seed of worry planted itself in my mind. I told myself everything was fine. This was just an adjustment period. We were closer, more connected than ever before. But deep down, I wondered if we'd opened a door that couldn't be closed, if the thrill of that night would eventually give way to something neither of us could predict. The excitement from our threesomes started to feel like a distant memory as Tom grew more distant by the day. A week after our adventurous night, I noticed the change. He'd sit at the kitchen table, staring off into space, or he'd get lost in his phone, and not the usual mindless scrolling. He was deep in thought, clearly somewhere far away from me. Our conversations, once filled with easy banter and shared jokes, had turned into monosyllabic exchanges. It was like talking to a brick wall. Small disagreements, which we used to laugh off, started blowing up into full-blown arguments. I'd ask Tom about his day, and he'd snap at me for no reason. The dishes, the laundry, the dinner menu, everything became a potential battleground. It was exhausting. I kept asking myself, what the hell was happening to us? The thrill from the threesome had evaporated, leaving this thick, suffocating tension in its place. Tom blamed it all on work stress. He said his job was getting more demanding, and that's why he was staying late more often. But I wasn't buying it. The late nights at the office, the increasing silence between us, something else was going on. I could feel it in my gut. The man who once couldn't keep his hands off me now seemed like he couldn't get far enough away. Desperate for answers, I reached out to Emma. Maybe she'd have some insight, I thought. We met up for a drink, and the minute I saw her, I felt a twinge of jealousy. She was effortlessly put together, as usual, and I couldn't help but think about how she'd been part of that night that now seemed to be unraveling my life. Over drinks, Emma didn't beat around the bush. She told me that Tom had been texting her a lot. He'd been pouring out his doubts and regrets about the threesome, and she didn't know how to handle it. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Betrayed wasn't even the word for it. Tom had been having these deep, emotional conversations with Emma behind my back. The secret communications stung more than any of our recent fights. That night, I confronted Tom. I was trembling with a mix of anger and hurt as I laid out what I knew. His reaction was a mix of shame and relief, like he'd been waiting to get caught. He admitted everything. He felt overwhelmed by guilt and regret. Seeing me with another person, he said, had been eating away at him. It was like a wound that wouldn't heal, no matter how much we tried to cover it up with normalcy. I felt a mix of emotions. Anger at his secret texts, sorrow for his pain, and frustration at our crumbling relationship. The man who'd been my partner in crime, my confidant, and my lover, now seemed like a stranger. I tried to reach out, to bridge the growing gap, but it felt like I was talking to someone on the other side of an ocean. Days turned into weeks, and the distance between us grew. Our once frequent and loving interactions dwindled to almost nothing. I felt isolated in my own home, frustrated and helpless. How had we gone from a night of excitement and connection to this cold, empty silence? The rift between us seemed insurmountable, and I had no idea how to fix it. The threesome, which was supposed to bring us closer, had become the catalyst for our unraveling. I think we should see a marriage counselor, I blurted out one evening, the words hanging in the air like a ticking time bomb. Tom's eyes narrowed, but to my surprise, he reluctantly agreed. Maybe he realized things were spiraling out of control just as much as I did. Our first counseling session was a nightmare. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Tom was cooperative, crossing his arms and giving curt, defensive answers. I felt like I was trying to drag a mule through quicksand. The counselor suggested we try individual sessions, seeing that our joint effort was going nowhere. In my solo session, I spilled my guts. Frustration, confusion, anger, it all came pouring out. The counselor listened patiently and then gently pointed out that Tom's issues went deeper than the threesome. It was like a light bulb moment. All this time, I'd been focusing on the threesome as the root of our problems, but maybe it was just the trigger for underlying issues we'd ignored for too long. Meanwhile, Tom's individual session led to a complete breakdown. When he came home that night, he looked like he'd been hit by a truck. He admitted to feeling emasculated and betrayed, even though the threesome was something we both agreed to. It was a mutual decision, but the aftermath was far from mutual. Then, during one of our increasingly frequent and heated arguments, Tom dropped a bombshell. "I've been considering divorce even before the threesome," he yelled, his voice echoing in the silent house. I stood there, blindsided, as the words sank in. Divorce? Before the threesome? It felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. Suddenly, everything about our relationship was up for questioning. We decided to take a break, hoping some distance would help us figure things out. Tom moved in with a friend, leaving me alone in our house. The silence was deafening. Every creak and groan of the house seemed to echo the emptiness inside me. It was like living in a ghost town, where every corner held a memory of what we used to be. In the quiet of our separation, I had a lot of time to think. I reflected on our relationship, sifting through the good times and the bad. I realized that the threesome was just a symptom of deeper issues. We had ignored so many signs, so many cracks in our foundation. The thrill of that night was a temporary patch over a gaping wound. As the days turned into weeks, I started to accept the possibility that our marriage might not survive. It was a painful realization, but maybe it was time to face the truth. We had drifted apart long before Emma came into the picture. The threesome just forced us to confront the reality we'd been avoiding. With a heavy heart, I began to understand that sometimes love isn't enough to fix what's broken. The weight of our crumbling marriage settled on my shoulders, and I braced myself for what was to come, knowing that the hardest decisions were still ahead. We sat across from each other in a cramped coffee shop, the air thick with the smell of stale espresso and broken dreams. Tom looked as worn out as I felt. I think we both know where this is headed, I said, breaking the silence that had stretched for too long. He nodded, eyes fixed on his untouched coffee. Yeah, I think it's time. And just like that, we decided to divorce. It was painful, but at this point, it seemed inevitable. The legal proceedings were a nightmare. We hired lawyers, each meeting a grueling reminder of the life we were dismantling piece by piece. Every document signed felt like a step further away from what we once had. It was emotionally draining, and I found myself questioning everything. How did we get here? Was it really just the threesome, or had we been unraveling long before? Dividing our assets was another battleground. We argued over everything: who would keep the house, how to split our savings, even the stupid collection of mismatched mugs we'd accumulated over the years. It felt like we were fighting for pieces of our past, clinging to anything that might hold some semblance of our former life. The whole process was exhausting and heartbreaking. Breaking the news to friends and family was no picnic either. Reactions ranged from supportive hugs to looks of sheer disappointment. My parents were devastated, their dreams of a perfect son-in-law and stable marriage crumbling before their eyes. Some friends rallied around me, offering support, while others distanced themselves, unsure how to handle the situation. It was a mix of shame and relief, knowing I didn't have to pretend everything was fine anymore. I had to tell Emma about the divorce. Her reaction was a mix of guilt and sympathy. I'm so sorry, she said, her voice tinged with regret. Despite everything, I appreciated her support. Our friendship was awkward now, colored by the complicated history we shared, but it was still something. She had been a catalyst, not the cause, and I couldn't blame her entirely. After months of negotiations, court appearances, and endless paperwork, the divorce was finally finalized. The day I received the final papers was bittersweet. I held them in my hands, the weight of them heavier than I expected. It was the end of an era, the closing of a chapter one never thought would end this way. But it was also the beginning of something new, and that thought brought a small, cautious sense of hope. Tom moved out for good, leaving me with the house. The emptiness was overwhelming at first. Every room echoed with memories of us, both good and bad. But I knew I had to make it my own. I started redecorating, painting walls, and rearranging furniture. It was therapeutic, a way to reclaim my space and my life. Slowly, the house transformed from a shrine of what once was to a canvas of what could be. I stood in the middle of my newly redecorated living room, taking it all in. It wasn't just a physical change, it was symbolic of my new beginning. The past was behind me, and while the future was uncertain, it was mine to shape. I had faced the challenge of letting go and discovered a strength I didn't know I had. And for the first time in a long while, I felt a glimmer of peace. There's something surreal about waking up alone in a house that used to echo with laughter and arguments. The silence was deafening, but it also felt like the calm after a storm. I threw myself into work and hobbies, desperate to rebuild my life from the ground up. I reconnected with old friends, and we laughed like we hadn't missed a beat. Staying active and engaged became my new mantra, and it felt good to rediscover parts of myself I'd forgotten. Of course, my well-meaning friends couldn't resist meddling in my love life. You need to get back out there, they insisted. Try online dating, it's the new normal, right? Because swiping through profiles was the magic cure for heartbreak. But I gave in, created a profile, and soon found myself plunged into the chaotic world of online dating. Exciting and daunting were understatements. It felt like trying to find a needle in a haystack, except the haystack was full of strange, awkward, and occasionally creepy needles. My first date post-divorce was with a guy named Mark. Awkward doesn't even begin to cover it. We met at a trendy coffee shop, and I swear I almost turned around and walked out. But Mark turned out to be kind and understanding, with a good sense of humor. We shared a nice evening, talking about everything from our favorite books to the bizarre experiences of online dating. I left feeling hopeful, like maybe, just maybe, I could do this. Spending more time with friends became a priority. We went out, danced, and laughed until our sides hurt. Those moments of joy and connection helped me heal, reminding me that there was more to life than the wreckage of my marriage. My therapist also played a crucial role. We continued our sessions, focusing on self-improvement and understanding my needs. Each session was like peeling back layers of old, dead skin to reveal something fresher, stronger underneath. Emma's decision to move to a different city for a new job was bittersweet. We met for one last drink, and despite everything, there was no bad blood. I wished her well, and as we hugged goodbye, it felt like closing the book on a particularly tumultuous chapter of my life. I immersed myself in personal growth, taking classes and learning new skills. I picked up painting, something I hadn't done since college. Every brushstroke felt like reclaiming a piece myself. I also started a cooking class, which was a riot considering I could barely boil water without burning it. But each little accomplishment, whether it was a decent painting or an edible meal, felt like a victory. One evening, as I sat in my newly decorated living room, sipping wine and admiring my latest attempt at abstract art, I realized how far I'd come. The house, once a museum of memories, was now a canvas of my new life. The past still lingered, but it no longer defined me. I was moving forward, one step at a time, reclaiming my identity and discovering new strengths. Life wasn't perfect, and I still had moments of doubt and sadness. But I was learning to embrace the uncertainty, finding peace in the journey rather than the destination. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was exactly where I needed to be. Morning jogs, healthy meals, and regular social outings became my new routine. Establishing this rhythm felt like piecing together a puzzle of stability. My morning jogs through the park were my meditation, each step a small victory against the chaos that had been my life. Eating healthy wasn't just about the food, it was about nurturing myself, showing my body the care I'd neglected for so long. Social activities filled my evenings with laughter and camaraderie, pushing away the silence that had once seemed so oppressive. But life has a funny way of throwing curveballs. At a mutual friend's party, I ran into Tom. The room seemed to shrink as I spotted him across the room, nursing a drink. Our encounter was civil but distant, like two acquaintances making small talk rather than two people who had once shared a life. We exchanged polite conversation, skirting around the elephant in the room. It was clear we'd both moved on, but the awkwardness was palpable. I left the party feeling a mix of relief and sadness, realizing that our chapter had truly ended. Work became a sanctuary. I poured myself into my career, and my efforts didn't go unnoticed. Receiving a promotion was like validation for all the hard work and sleepless nights. The recognition boosted my confidence, fueling my motivation to keep pushing forward. It was a testament to my resilience, a reminder that I could rebuild my life piece by piece. Family visits became more frequent. There was a comforting familiarity in my parents' home, a place where I could let my guard down. Their unconditional love was a balm to my wounded soul, reinforcing my sense of belonging. We shared meals, stories, and laughter, and each visit helped mend the fractures in my heart. Starting a new relationship with Mark was a cautious, but hopeful step. It was different from what I had with Tom, more deliberate and measured. We took things slow, building trust and understanding one day at a time. There were no grand gestures, just genuine moments of connection that felt right. It was a new kind of normal, one that didn't carry the weight of past mistakes. Deciding to take a solo vacation was a bold move. I'd always dreamed of escaping to a beach destination alone, and now was the perfect time. The sun, sand, and sea were liberating. I spent my days lounging on the beach, reading novels, and reflecting on my journey. The experience was refreshing and empowering, a reminder that I was capable of finding joy on my own terms. Returning home, I felt like a new person, ready to embrace whatever came next. Then, out of the blue, Tom reached out. His apology was sincere, a long overdue acknowledgement of his behavior and the way things ended. We met for coffee, and for the first time in a long while, there was no tension. Just two people sharing a past, finding closure. His apology was the final piece I needed to fully move on. We both agreed to leave the past behind, each of us ready to start anew. Finding contentment in my new life was a slow process. The pain of the past still lingered, but it no longer defined me. I found peace in the everyday moments, morning jogs, quiet evenings, and time spent with loved ones. My new relationship with Mark flourished, and I felt a sense of hope and resilience that I hadn't felt in years. The future was uncertain, but it was mine to shape, and for the first time, that uncertainty felt exciting rather than terrifying. Life wasn't perfect, but it was real, and it was mine. I embraced it with open arms, ready for whatever came next. Just when I thought life was finally stabilizing, Mark dropped a bombshell that shattered my fragile peace. I need to tell you something, he said, his voice heavy with guilt. Those words are never the prelude to anything good. Turns out, Mark had a brief fling with Emma before she left town. Yep, the same Emma who played a starring role in the dramatic downfall of my marriage. The revelation hit me like a ton of bricks. Betrayed and confused didn't even begin to was my life some sort of cosmic joke. I confronted Mark about his fling with Emma. His explanation was that it happened before we got serious, like that was supposed to make it better. I felt a fresh wave of betrayal. Here I was, trying to move forward, and my past was lurking around every corner, ready to trip me up. We decided to take a break to reassess our relationship. Trust, already a tricky beast, felt even more elusive now. As if the universe hadn't had enough fun with me yet, Emma returned to town for a visit. She reached out, and against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her for coffee. The conversation was tense, each word loaded with unspoken accusations and regrets. She apologized for her actions, genuinely seeking forgiveness. I struggled with the idea of forgiveness. Holding on to anger seemed easier, but ultimately pointless. Did I really want to lug around that bitterness forever? In the end, I decided to forgive Emma. It wasn't about her, it was about me needing to let go and move forward with a clean slate. Carrying that anger was exhausting, and frankly, I had enough baggage to deal with. Letting go felt liberating, like shedding an old, heavy coat. Rebuilding trust with Mark was a slow, uphill battle. We attended couples therapy, laying our fears and insecurities bare. It wasn't pretty, but it was necessary. We communicated openly about our feelings, and bit by bit, we started to mend the cracks. Through therapy, I realized how vital trust and communication were. We grew closer, understanding each other in ways we hadn't before. Emma decided to move permanently. Our final goodbye was bittersweet. Despite everything, we parted on good terms. It felt like closing a chapter that had been open for far too long. With her departure, a sense of closure settled over me. Mark and I strengthened our bond, planning a future together. We learned from our past mistakes, vowing to build a relationship based on honesty and respect. It wasn't easy, and the scars from our past would always be there, but we were committed to making it work. For the first time in a long while, I felt hopeful about what lay ahead. The unexpected twists had tested us, but they also made us stronger. And in that strength, I found a sense of peace I hadn't known was possible. Mark dropped to one knee in the middle of our favorite park, and for a moment, I thought he was tying his shoe. But when he pulled out a small velvet box, my heart nearly stopped. "Will you marry me?" he asked, eyes filled with hope and excitement. I said yes, of course, and just like that, we were engaged. This was our new beginning, a fresh start filled with promise. Planning our future together was exhilarating. We started blending our families, which was challenging but also rewarding. There were awkward moments and growing pains, but we created new traditions and cherished the memories we were building. Family dinners, holiday gatherings, each event knit our lives closer together. Our careers were also hitting high notes. Mark got a big promotion, and I landed a major project at work. We celebrated each success, big and small, supporting each other's ambitions. It felt like we were unstoppable, two parts of a whole moving forward in perfect sync. Buying a home together was a monumental step. We found a beautiful house that felt like it was waiting just for us. The process of decorating and making it ours was joyful. Every piece of furniture, every color on the walls, felt like a declaration of our commitment. It was a symbol of the life we were building together, brick by brick. Wedding planning, though, was a whirlwind of excitement and stress. We navigated through decisions about venues, guest lists, and menus, making sure the day would reflect our love and journey. There were moments when I wanted to pull my hair out, but Mark was there, steady and supportive, reminding me why we were doing all this. The wedding day arrived, perfect in every way. Surrounded by friends and family, we exchanged vows that held the weight of our journey. It was emotional, beautiful, and everything I dreamed of. As we stood there, hand in hand, I felt the culmination of all our struggles and triumphs. It was a moment of pure, unfiltered joy. Our honeymoon was a dream come true. We traveled to a tropical paradise, basking in the sun and each other's company. It was the perfect escape, a time to relax and enjoy the beginning of our new chapter. Every day felt like a celebration of our love and commitment. Returning home, we settled into married life. The routine was comforting, and we continued to grow and learn together. There was something profoundly satisfying about the mundane moments, cooking dinner, watching movies, even just sitting in comfortable silence. It was a testament to our bond and the life we were creating. We started discussing future plans, including starting a family. Those conversations were filled with hope and excitement. Imagining a future with children, a house filled with laughter and love, was a beautiful dream. It felt like everything was falling into place. Reflecting on the past, I couldn't help but marvel at how far I'd come. The pain and challenges had shaped me, made me stronger and more resilient. I had faced betrayal, heartache, and uncertainty, but I had emerged on the other side, ready to embrace whatever came next. Embracing the future with Mark, I felt a profound sense of peace. Our journey together was just beginning, and I was excited for what lay ahead. The story of the threesome and its aftermath was now a part of my past, a chapter that had closed. I looked forward to the new chapters of my life with optimism and gratitude for the lessons learned. This was my new chapter, a fresh page in the book of my life. I was ready to write it with joy, love, and hope. The past had its place, but it no longer defined me. I was free to embrace the future, hand in hand with the man I loved, ready for whatever came next. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe